Welcome to the Defence Connect podcast, Australia's leading voice in national security and defence industry intelligence, direct from the nation's top policy and business experts.
Welcome back to the Defence Connect podcast. You've got senior journalist Robert Dougherty and a special guest here from Paul Bennet Airshows, founder Paul Bennet, aerobatic pilot, and I would say definitely an aviation enthusiast as well. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, and I know you're busy sort of preparing for the Wings Over Shellharbour airshow coming up, and I think we've just caught you after a practice round. Is that right?
Yeah, I just flew a Spitfire down from Scone, jumped out of that, and then led the four-ship Sky Aces formation team.
It's a busy schedule. We know also that you have an extensive aircraft collection, Grumman Avenger, T-28 Trojan, CAC Wirraway, Piper J3 Cub, Yak 52, two of them, Cessna 02, Pitts Model 12, Hawker Sea Fury, Cessna 185 Skywagon, de Havilland Vampire, and an F4U Corsair. And in your spare time, after all those aircraft, you still regularly have a chance to fly a Mustang, Kitty Hawk, Hurricane, and other aircraft. What's the I guess where's that passion for aircraft stem from for you? Is it something that you like the idea of flight, or is it more of the military aircraft side of things that you're interested in?
I just always loved aviation in general. I was lucky enough to go for a ride in an aeroplane when I was young, which I guess I caught the bug with my father, and then continued on. I knew that I was keen to be, involved in aviation, and when I was young, I flew model aeroplanes, control line first, and then RC, and I still do fly RC aeroplanes. So,
wow,
I guess that's where the initial part of the bug came from. And then one day I was lucky enough to go for a friend of mine had recently gone solo in a two-seat pit special, and I was lucky enough to go for a ride with him after flying models one day, and that was awesome. I knew I'd love it, and anyway, I did love it. And then, so that was on a Sunday afternoon, and then the following Monday, I was at the Aero Club trying to get my pilot's license.
It sounds like quite an immediate sort of thing. Is it the military aircraft side of things? Is that because those models have that aerobatic performance, perhaps that's more than a civilian aircraft, or is that just an extension of some enthusiasm from yourself in terms of the Hurricane and Sea Fury and stuff like that as an iconic aircraft?
They're iconic, cool aeroplanes that are fantastic to fly. They're all different. I guess I like the fighters because they're aerobatic. So you can do loops, rolls, wing overs, half Cubans, barrel rolls, point rolls, and so on, which comes from the aerobatic background a little bit. So I've got a real passion for the aerobatics, and that's why I still compete in aerobatics. I think that on the aerobatic side, you shouldn't be flying a high performance aerobatic aeroplane at an air show unless you've pretty much at least won advanced in the Australian Aerobatic Championships, or at least a state comp, against some good competitors, or at least got a real high score that shows you're capable of winning. But then that converts to when you fly a Spitfire, Mustang, Kitty Hawk, Sea Fury, whatever. Obviously, they're high performance in a different way. They're high performance warbird, so we don't pull high G's in them, but they're certainly moving quick. You're running in at 400 knots in a Sea Fury, so you need to be pretty accurate with where you're aiming at 400 knots, and then you got to make your speeds and gates to achieve what you want to achieve aerobatically.
Is there a favourite that you have there? Is there one particular one that you like to fly over the others?
I love them all, to be honest, but yeah, I like the Sea Fury. I like the Spitfire. To be honest, I like them all. They're all different in their own way. They're all got different harmony and balance in the controls. Mustang is easy to go fast in. Sea Fury is easy to go fast in. Spitfire's really nice and balanced in the control. So is a Kitty Hawk. Yeah, they're all pretty cool.
What about I know the Havilland Vampire is there. I believe that's is it a jet aircraft? I think, is that right?
Yeah, T-55 Vampire's a jets.
Yeah,
one of the early jets.
So how would you term sort of, I guess, that comparison between a pretty modern propeller aircraft, like a Sea Fury or something like that, compared to maybe an early jet?
Well, the Sea Fury and the Jet and the Vampire are very similar in, I guess the Sea Fury was the highest performing, it's the fastest piston fighter ever designed and built. So it compares actually pretty closely with the Vampire. So, you're running at 400 knots in both those aeroplanes. You could pretty much fly the same display in both. You could do formation aerobatics with both. So they're actually, they're both British. They feel quite similar to fly, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Is there an aircraft out there that you don't currently have at the moment, which you're thinking, that's what I'm working towards, or that would be the dream goal?
Yeah, I've got too many of those. A Bearcat, a Thunderbolt,
A bit
and
of
a
a collection.
P-38 Lightning.
Yeah,
That'd
yeah.
be the next three.
Which ones are the Lightning, did you say?
Yeah, P-38 Lightning, a Thunderbolt, P-47 Thunderbolt, Bearcat.
Okay.
Probably the Bearcat first, I think.
Mm. There must be a lot of storage for all this as well. I imagine it'd be a lot of maintenance to keep all these up to date. Maybe some running or some not, or are they all running? How does it work exactly on that side of things?
No, I need to keep them all running. I get frustrated when they're not running. So they're all running. We house most of them in a museum at Scone. So Hunter Fighter Collection is our museum that Ross Pay and I share. So in that is his Spitfire, Mustang, and Kitty Hawk, Stearman, Harvard, Tiger Moth, and then we've got some shared aeroplanes, and then we've got my fleet also lives in there, and they're on display. You can see them at Scone whenever you're passing through Scone. It's a fantastic facility that's owned by the council, and Ross and I run it with our teams.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine there's some challenges there in terms of maintenance and engineering. Some of the parts, I imagine, are potentially hard to get. What are the sort of challenges there to keeping everything active?
Yeah, there's still a fair few parts around, but there are things that you have to make. We have to pull a part down and CNC it, make sure it's made out of the right material, and test it, make sure it's right, and get it working. It's the only way to do it these days. Is you can make parts better than what they were back in the day. But to be honest, the way these old machines were built, they really were built in a hurry, for the war, and they did a fantastic job. To be honest, like the design and the way they were built, and they built them so fast. I think it was a real credit to how well they did it.
Mm-hmm. What about, I mean, I imagine you can't just go down to the corner shop and pick up yourself a vintage military aircraft, shall we say. How is the actual sort of finding the next one you want to get and looking at the state of preservation? How does that usually go? What sort of process do you use there?
Well, it depends what you want and how much money you got. Really, you can buy anything you want if you got enough money.
Mm.
That's my problem. I just don't have enough. But
Don't we all?
like when I'm ready to buy a Bearcat, I'm just going to be looking around and try and find the right one. In this case, I don't really have time to spend 10 years building it. I am building a Spitfire, which, that'll probably take 10 years before it's finished. It just takes what it takes, but I'd rather get a Bearcat sooner. So I'll probably just find one that's a pretty good one. And, we might have to do bits and pieces to it, but like the Sea Fury, it worked out really well. Bought a great Sea Fury, and it's been just about faultless. And the Corsair's worked out well. It was restored up in Mariba by Mike Spalding and his team. They did a great job of it, and it's a great machine to fly, and it's been faultless as well. Just very small. We had a fuel pump that had a bad earth. That's about the only thing that's gone wrong with it. We've done some bits and pieces to it, but you're always going to have things that happen with these machines. But if you're nice to them, you look after them properly, and you maintain them. We don't leave all. If you get a list of problems, we just fix them. We don't till like the annual inspection time and end up with a massive blister. We just fix everything as it needs to be fixed. If you find something that's not right, well, then next week you got to fix it.
On that note as well, obviously it can be, as you said, expensive and sort of technically demanding. Do you think there's being enough done in Australia to to support restoration and preservation of historical aircraft. Like I know the CAC Wirraway is one of those very heavily Australian connected aircraft, and also the Boomerang and aircraft like that. I think there's been enough done for that.
Preserving them is difficult, they're really cool things to be able to look after, but you just got to do your best. I mean, you can't just go and buy whatever you need for it. Sometimes you got to engineer things. And look, like for example, we need to get. Let's say we're going to get brakes for the Wirraway. Well, we get them made overseas. We have a look at the original. We try and copy it, and we make them and test them and see that they're pretty much as good as the originals. You just got to do something when there's nothing left.
Yeah, but as a national effort, there's enough museums and enthusiasts doing restorations that, these will continue to be working aircraft and viewable aircraft into the future in Australia.
Yeah, but I think that, there isn't enough support for museums and these special interest groups, to be honest. I think there can always be more done, that's for sure. There are several special interest groups like myself and Ross Bay and Tamora that and Haas that are doing this work, but there can always be more done. It'd be nice to, sometimes you feel like there's not much support out there for it,
Yeah. What about I notice a lot of the aircraft you have are British, the US, or some of them Australian. Is there a gap between I guess those aircraft or availability of other aircraft from rival powers at the time? So Japanese aircraft like the Zero, German aircraft like the Bf-109s, things like that. Are those available, or is it and would you be comfortable flying them, or is it more your interest in allied aircraft?
Oh, I'd be comfortable flying them, but there's very few available.
So it's a supply issue.
Yeah, there's very few. I think there's only 2 Bf-109s in the US, and I think there's maybe 1 or 2 in the UK, but there's not many at all. And the Japanese, like say a Zero, I think there's only 2 Zeros in the world. There's only one flying at the moment. That's at Plains of Fame in Chino, California. I think there's another one almost ready to go. But, there just aren't enough of them, and there's not enough to start with. To go and build one is a massive undertaking, and to my knowledge, there's very few engines, for example. So you've got to base an airframe around the availability of an engine. Well, it's sort of not the same if you've got to go and put a Pratt & Whitney in something that, should have had effectively a Japanese engine in it.
Yeah.
Well, like the 109 with the Daimler Benz, for example, there's not many people in the world that can work on and get a Daimler Benz going. A bit like the Sea Fury, with the original engine, the Bristol Centaurus. Well, there's really only anyone worldwide sends their engines to Nobby up in Darwin to get them fixed, and it's expensive to get one fixed, and it's only Nobby, and Nobby's not getting any younger, so it takes a couple of years to get one, which is why mine's got a 3350 in it, right Cyclone, because it's just more user friendly. It's got more power, and I want something that I can just push out and go flying without having to spend a week every time I want to fly it. If it's too cumbersome to fly, well, then you won't fly them.
Yeah. It becomes a bit of a garage queen type situation, I imagine. We'll go to a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about wings over Shellharbour. Welcome back to the Defence Connect podcast. You've got senior journalist Robert Dougherty and our guest Paul Bennet from Paul Bennet Airshows. We're talking about the wings over Shellharbour now, and I want to understand why we put these air shows together. Is it important that air shows sort of help the public understand aviation and the role of military aviation, and what's that impact on sort of STEM careers, things like science, technology, maths, etc. What do you see from your experience at air shows? Is it important to keep public, I guess, up to date with what's happening in aviation from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it is. And I mean, one of our big goals is to promote aviation in general to the next generation of aviators, whether it be private aviation, commercial aviation, lamies, pilots, anything involved with aviation really, as well as, defence aviation. We obviously try pretty hard to, promote defence aviation.
There's always a big showing of the air shows as well. Often Navy will be there, or Air Force sometimes, and Army, to kind of show what some of the systems are that are coming in, and they might have VR sort of systems for members of the public to use.
And they do, and they're supporting this show with all that, with sims and helicopters, and the roulettes will be here. What's disappointing though is that you really need a fast jet. If you've got kids in the crowd,
yeah,
that think they want to go to the Air Force, nothing gets them across the line like a fast jet does.
Like an F-22
yes,
or
I've got
something.
my Vampire, and yes, we've got an L-39, but it's not the same as an F-35 or a Hornet, and those things do attract, and it's disappointing that this show isn't being supported with one, especially when we put so much time, effort and money into this show. Effectively for the Air Force, we're putting on a free platform for them to recruit at. So they should, if they were smart, they would get behind it and use it so they don't have to spend their money on putting on their own air show. They can come to an air show like this, Wings Over Shellharbour air show, and support it and get all the free add-ons that go with it, like recruiting. Beats me why they don't support it, but that's life. We don't need it. We can do air shows without them, but it, to me, it just adds to the whole aspect of it. Obviously, the more that you can provide for the public, the better the event's going to be. And the STEM part of it, which is on Friday tomorrow, which we're looking forward to. There's 12 or 1,300 between school, year 7 school students and uni. And I think it'll give them a great kickstart. We've got some great speakers and some great things for them to be interested in. If we can introduce, let's say we introduced half of those into aviation in general, maybe some go to the Air Force and some go to commercial aviation, and there'll be some of them that might stay private, but it's still good if they're in aviation. It's something that's really cool and exciting to do, and you can make a livelihood out of it, or you can do it for fun. Take your pick.
I don't know if you recall, you might recall air shows sort of mid-2000s. They used to have the F111 doing a bit of a burn-off of avgas. That was always a big crowd highlight as far as I can remember. What were your sort of thoughts there, memories of that?
Oh, the dump and burn was awesome. Yeah, I'd love to get an F111 back to do a dump and burn for sure. They did it at heaps of shows. They would always do it. It was great. A real good crowd pleaser, something that would, get the kids' attention, something that they would remember. You think you've been to many air shows over the years. That's obviously something you remember because it was something that really got your attention.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, is you've got to give them something to remember so that when they get, a little bit older and they're considering what they're going to do for a job, they consider aviation.
What about for the next couple of years, obviously for your organisation? What are you looking at for, developing into the next 5 to 10 years for the air shows on your end?
Well, we're always looking at new things. I mean, effectively, the PBA team can almost have an air show without any other involvement. But it's way better when we do get the other involvement. Just, the bigger you can make it, the better. But, we've got a lot of aeroplanes under my umbrella, under our space umbrella. That makes it pretty handy. And then we add in a helicopter here and a few other guys. It's great. We're always trying to present something new. We want to make sure that we can present fun family entertainment. I think it's really good for families to, unite and have something to do as a family where they all got something out of it. It's not just for the dads and the sons, it's for the daughters, the mums. Everyone will get something out of it, and to see the smile on the kids' faces, and that puts a smile on mum and dad's face. That's what makes me happy when people are having a great day out at the air show that we've provided for them. It's and obviously it doesn't come free. They've obviously got to buy a ticket because we're bringing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of machinery and infrastructure, so it's a big deal.
Yep.
I'd like to make this show, bigger. I want to make air shows in general bigger, and get better attendance. we're doing, so our air show team's growing, our following's getting bigger, our marketing's getting bigger and better. We're doing more and more shows around the country. So everything's going really well there. I'm doing shows in other parts of the world, been doing one in South Korea every year for 20 something years. Doing some shows in America. I flew at Oshkosh last year. I'm flying at Oshkosh again this year. As soon as I finish at this show here at Shellharbour, I'm off to New York to fly the Atlantic City Air Show in the US.
Is that, just on that as well, is that a different experience? I mean, from the air shows in Australia, just the ones you see in Korea and the US, how do they kind of differ from your point of view?
They don't have as much flying at the South Korean air show. I'm the only civilian that gets invited there. They're pretty much military. They don't really have a whole lot of their own GA aviation over there. They don't have any aerobatic performers in South Korea, so that's why they continue to invite me.
Is that an airspace issue in terms of, or it's just
no? They've got GAs in Cirruses and Cessnas and stuff, but they don't have any aerobatics. And the airspace in South Korea is actually pretty good. Like I've flown across South Korea several times from one show to the next.
Yep.
Not so much in China. It's a lot more difficult to get. All the airspace in China is owned by the military, so to try and get a clearance or a release to do it is quite difficult. Americans are great. Like flying in American airspace is awesome. It's just so much easier than here. They're accommodating. They make you feel welcome. They want to help you. They're giving you weather updates. They give you suggestions. Over here, they just want you to not be there.
I imagine there's a bit more flexibility in the US in terms of what aircraft you can own and things like that, from what I've heard previously, in terms of surplus military aircraft and things like that. What's your experience there?
Well, US is a big country with a lot of people in it, obviously, and that's where a lot of ex-military warbirds were built, and so I guess there's a lot still left over there from the war, and people have salvaged them and so on, and I think that's a great thing. I think a lot of that's just due to their large population, and I guess that's why that's why they have so many air shows, and that's why a lot of air shows are pretty well attended over there. They're like all air shows in the US are very well supported by the military. Over there they realise that people putting on the shows, if the military support it, they get a lot of, I suppose it's not free recruiting because they've got to take a team there and take their jets, which obviously don't run for free, but it's a lot cheaper than them having to put on their whole show themselves.
That's
so
true.
It just works well in the US, and it's nice to be a part of it. To be honest, I like flying there, and it made me feel welcome. It's been great.
Just on that as well, we'll go to a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking more about the Australian defence industry. Welcome back to Defence Connect podcast. You've got senior journalist Robert Dougherty and Paul Bennet, our guest from Paul Bennet Airshows. We're talking about defence industry now, and I guess I want to explore that wider issue of where do you see the strongest opportunities to collaborate between, I guess, the aviation community and government, and maybe even into the historical sort of aviation side of things. Is there some opportunities there that we're missing where Australia can really capitalise on what's already in place?
You mean as in like civilian working with the military side of aviation in Australia?
Yeah. And also, I guess you mentioned before, recruitment side of things. What would you like to see on that front, I guess? Yeah.
Well, it'd be nice if they just support air shows a lot more. If they send a fast jet to a lot of air shows, that really makes a difference to the recruiting, and it makes a difference to how big the show is. And when people like me are putting on a show, building a platform for them to put on a show, it makes no sense to me why they wouldn't come and support it to get the free add-on of the recruiting, especially when we're having the STEM thing on the Friday. It's just a bit disappointing, I suppose. When they want a graduation or something, they ring me up and say, "Can I come and fly for them?" I take a P40 Kitty Hawk over there, and it takes a day out of my life, go and do a display for them for a graduation of the Hawks or the F-35s or whatever. we do all that free of charge, and then you'd like to think that, you know, you scratch the back and you get it scratched back again would be nice, but it just doesn't always work like that. You know, that the Air Force is just such a big moving operation. There's a lot of personalities, a lot of people involved in it, and I think, you know, sometimes I think the decision makers don't really know, you know, what happens at a lower level, and not what promises are made, but, you know, what, I guess, what deals get done. You know, like the squadron can ring me and say, can you come and support this event? And I'll go, yeah, no worries. It would be nice if you could support us with an F-35. Yeah, we'll do our best. And, you know, so you can't complain, but obviously it's not the squadron that's stopping it.
What about collaboration in terms of manufacturing? Is there an opportunity for, you know, obviously enthusiasts and air shows like yourself, there you'll be ordering parts or creating parts. Is there an opportunity to have a bit of a supply chain, I guess, involved there from a defense industry point of view? Would that work?
Well, there probably is. I mean, they've got a lot of high-end contractors that obviously makes parts for, you know, modern day military machinery. I'm sure it would be handy if we could collaborate there and get those. You know, they've obviously got some smart people that can, and some good machinery that can make some pretty cool stuff. It would be nice if we had somewhere to turn there, so we could, you know, we could send them a bracket. They could analyze the metal and then say, yeah, we can make that. Here's how we do it. And then send us back a bracket. You know, that'd be awesome when you're trying to keep ex-military machinery going. I know there's a cost to that, but maybe they could, you know, maybe that's a way of collaborating because they've got the machinery, they've got the people, they've got the ideas. I could see that that'd be, you know, a good way to operate. Whether we ever get to that point or not, I don't know. But
yeah, it's a big ask to sort of, I guess, have that. That would be an entire aviation ecosystem manufacturing in Australia. That's probably
the biggest,
what we're saying.
I mean, Australia in general, we just don't manufacture enough in general in Australia. You know, we've given it all away, haven't we? From fuel to, you know, labour to everything. We've ended up getting too much stuff made overseas, and now, you know, obviously this war has shown that we're not in a great position at the moment.
Just on the recruitment side of things, you know, perhaps we can talk about some of the opportunities there. What would you say to sort of young Australians who are looking at a career in aerospace or in aircraft? What's some of the benefits there that you've seen? Some of the enjoyable, you know, moments along your career.
Well, obviously one, you know, really good way to get a lot of aviation done is, you know, if you're pretty smart and you've done all right at school and you're pretty good at maths and, you know, you're good enough to fit through the fighter combat school and become a fighter pilot. Obviously, you know, that's a pretty good way of life once you get to that point. A lot of study and a lot of hard work to get there, obviously. But, you know, if you don't make it, you can still fly some pretty cool stuff. If you don't become a fighter pilot, you might be a heavy lift pilot, which I think would also be really great. You know, and if you don't go to the military and you want to do the GA route, well, there's scholarships available to be able to get your commercial license at a reasonable price and then pay it back once you start working. You know, there's avenues pretty easily now to get in the airlines, probably easier than what they were because there seems to be a shortage of pilots for the airlines. So I think that's a good way to go. Even, you know, commercial flying in general, whether it be, you know, firebombing, ag, being a bank runner pilot. There's heaps of ways to get started. I guess to get started in that part of aviation, you got to fork out a bit more, I suppose. Or if you do the military route, or effectively they're forking out for you. But then, you know, obviously then you're tied to the military for a period of time. It just depends how people are built and wired. You know, I'm not really wired for the military, so it doesn't really suit me or my way of life. As much as I support them and agree that we need them, and it's a great setup, but doesn't float my boat. You know, I love aerobatics and warbird flying, and that's not really a core business of the military. But yeah, there's many different ways of getting into aviation. I mean, even you know, we got an LSA flight school that a lot of young people come to learn to fly at. it makes me proud to be able to give back to aviation and teach them how to fly. Give our young instructors a go. Like all our instructors are quite young. They get a bit of experience, from flying with people like myself and Glenn and Marty, our team guys that are experienced. They get to do it. If they've got a bit of a quiet day, we'll put them in the Yak 52 and take them up and give them some flying, help them learn about how to keep people alive and stuff, do emergency maneuver training with them and get them better as pilots. Well, then all that gets passed on to their students. Look, there's heaps it's endless, the road of how we could go about it all. But I think, I'm a boat builder shipwright by trade. That was an awesome trade to do, and I loved it, and I still do. But the aviation world, it's just great having that three-dimensional aspect. And I think, a lot of good people in it, a lot of good opportunities. Hopefully, like this STEM thing tomorrow, hopefully that ends up being a winner, and I'd love to get, a percentage of those 1,300 people involved in aviation.
Perhaps we'll cap off with a final bit for the podcast. Is there a current aircraft that's within the ADF currently, or another defence force as well internationally, that you go, when that starts retiring, I'm going to grab one of them?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't mind an F-16.
F-16's the way to go. Yep.
But like, my Vampire's a pretty good jet, to be honest. It's it's just primitive. You can't put the throttle on too quick, or you're going to over temp it and stuff like that. Whereas, the modern jets, you can just push the throttle forward and the computer takes care of it. Now, for me, my arm and my eyes is the computer, so it's a bit different. But F-16, you just push the throttle forward and have a good time, I reckon. So I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to have.
Yeah. Well, they seem to be doing okay in Ukraine, and certainly internationally, they're internationally renowned. Thanks for coming on the podcast today, Paul. It's been great to have you here.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
And if you'd like more information, head over to any of the social media platforms apart from TikTok to see Defence Connect. And if you haven't got a ticket already, get down to Wings Over Shellharbour this weekend to see some great aerobatics from Paul Bennet.